Classical conditioning has been studied when it comes to studying fear. A lot of the things that we learn to fear, we learn through classical conditioning. There are things that naturally cause us fear, but there are also things that we are that we learn to be afraid of. Okay, so what did John Watson do with poor little Albert over here? He conditioned him to be afraid of a little harmless white rat. What he did was he gave the rat to little Albert. Little Albert was playing with the rat, no harm, no nothing, and then Watson snuck up behind him and rang a loud bell. Now, ringing a loud bell is a scary noise. The noise is going to make a baby cry. Okay? That's not a learned response, it's a natural response. But now, after making that loud sound, now when they put the rat in front of little Albert starts crying in response to the rat. It's made the association between the rat and the loud sound. Again, after 7 times, remember, repeated presentations is what it takes. Over and over, the animal learns, little Albert learned to be afraid of that rat. So this research had some ethical concerns. One thing is, what about, how is it, what happens afterwards? Does now he become afraid of the white rat now forever and ever, or is this something to be a permanent thing? You've caused him to be very much afraid of something here. What happens in the future next time he runs across a white rat? Well, what little Albert also discovered was not only was he afraid of the white rat, he was afraid of a white rat. He was afraid of white fuzzy cotton. He was afraid of John Watson himself wearing a Santa Claus beard. Those are all white and fuzzy, just like a white rat. Which conditioning process does this sound like? The fact that he becomes afraid of similar stimuli. Well, this is, of course, generalization. Little Albert generalized to not just the white rat, but to anything white and fuzzy. Well, unfortunately, what happens to little Albert? There's actually an interesting article that looked at what might have happened to little Albert. I'll see if I can find it at some point. What could Watson do to help him become less afraid? Well, he could try to use extinction, try to extinguish the response. Present the white rat without ringing the bell, and do it repeatedly. Eventually, the harmless rat is going, the crying response will become less and less to the harmless white rat, until eventually the response might be extinguished. Now, many humans do suffer from phobias, and this essentially can make the case that this comes from classical conditioning. There's evidence to support this, that we can make an association between 2 stimuli, and the stimulus can cause us fear. Now, snakes, spiders, heights, and dark, these are things that we are naturally prepared to respond with fear to. And if you are a human being who is not at all afraid of heights, and you're going to climb up to high places all the time, well, all it takes is one big fall and you're dead. So it's good to have a nice, healthy fear of heights. So you don't come walking off of the roofs of buildings just to see what would happen. You need to have a fear of height. But what about an irrational fear, such that anytime you go to a hotel, you refuse to go above the 3rd floor, or you become deathly afraid of driving over bridges, and you hate being on an overpass or something like that. It dramatically affects your life in a negative way, this fear of heights, so that you keep running away from things that could remind you of it. Well, that's a problem, and that might be when it becomes irrational. Then you have a phobia. One of the interesting things is that in terms of treatment, phobias are actually pretty treatable. There's actually some very good procedures available for treating people with phobias. If you have a phobia, if you have an irrational fear of heights, for example, that is preventing you from moving around in an effective way, if it's interfering with your life, there are ways in which you can try to resolve this, and you can seek therapy for it. Systematic desensitization. If you are with systematic desensitization is a procedure to try to rid someone of a phobia, and you want to repeatedly present the stimulus that is causing you fear without the unconditioned stimulus, without something that So, for example, the height without the falling, for example, or the snake without the biting, that kind of thing. Basically, the way it's systematic desensitization, you don't just throw them into the room with with a whole bunch of snakes and hope that they will get better. You need to be able to, first by learning to relax. You need to learn to relax in the presence of stimulus. So they teach you relaxation techniques, breathing. So essentially you're having this relaxation feeling while you're with the stimulus. But they don't just throw, again, a room of snakes. They start with something small, like maybe like a little rubber snake or something like that. Then maybe it would be a snake in an aquarium, okay, that can't get out. And then it might be a snake that the professor, that the therapist is holding. And so finally, maybe they can actually give you the snake and you can actually handle the snake and be relaxed. And this would be a way in which you could systematically desensitize someone from a fear of snakes. So you need to have the relaxation techniques. You need to have the person learning how to relax in the presence of the stimulus, the fear, the conditioned stimulus. Then you need to gradually, through successively try to get closer and closer to the actual thing that they fear. Like a hierarchy, starting with something that is very harmless. Again, like the rubber snake. It's not likely the person is going to have a really strong reaction to a rubber snake. But then move up to the snake in the aquarium until finally, the snake in the therapist's hands, and then finally the snake in the client's hands. So this step-by-step process, this hierarchy, as well as the relaxation at each step of the process, that's essentially systematic desensitization. Finally, let's take a look at some other applications. Here we've got counter conditioning, which is another way of treating someone with a with a particular condition. They associated the conditioned stimulus with a new incompatible response. So you can associate this might be a factor in why systematic desensitization is working. You're now pairing the thing that caused you fear with all this relaxation stuff going on, and you now may associate the conditioned stimulus with the relaxation response rather than the fear response. You might pair this with the conditioned stimulus with a new unconditioned stimulus. Essentially, learn something else. Learn to, if the spider is causing you fear, maybe link the spider with something else that might cause you happiness, and link it with something else, and you might not feel that fear. So, and then finally, there's aversive conditioning. And there's a good example. There's a good example from the movies with aversive conditioning. If you've ever seen the movie A Clockwork Orange, they took this young man who was very violent and had pleasure reactions whenever he saw images of violence and rape. It caused him to feel happy. It caused him to feel pleasure. What they did was they gave him a drug that would cause him to feel nausea in response to, and then when he showed them pictures of violent scenes, he then felt the nausea and then became associating the violence with the feeling of nausea. So that's aversive. Another example of aversive conditioning for those of you who might smoke and be trying to quit. Well, if you take your cigarettes and you put on the mouth part of the cigarette a very yucky tasting substance, whenever you put that cigarette in your mouth, you're going to taste the yucky taste, and you are going to be less likely to smoke after that. And the idea you associate the cigarette with the yucky taste rather than the pleasure you get from smoking. Conditioned taste aversion is another example of an application of classical conditioning. When if you eat a particular food and then you get sick after eating that food, you will very often develop a taste aversion to that food that you ate before you got sick. Even if the food itself did not cause you sickness, you would then have that taste aversion to that particular food smell, and you won't even want to go near it. I'm sure many of you have developed taste aversions to something. You tasted, you ate something, you got sick from it. Maybe it was something you once enjoyed eating, but now you can't even stand it, and it has to do with the taste aversion. And this might be a biological safety mechanism there, because we eat, if We might eat something poisonous and we get sick afterwards. May not take right away, but maybe in a couple of hours we get sick. We learn to associate what we ate with that sickness, and therefore we don't eat that again. And that's helpful for us for survival. It helps us avoid constantly eating poisonous foods that kill us. Taste aversion can only need to happen once. So you might have enjoyed hot dogs for all your life, but then you eat one hot dog and then afterwards you get food poisoning from it. Well, that sours you on all hot dogs from then on. Now all hot dogs, you can't stand it anymore. You can't even taste it. And it only had to happen once. Some additional applications of classical conditioning: the placebo effect. When we put a pill in our mouth, even if it's a sugar pill, and the doctor tells us it's a headache pill, we will automatically start having that endorphin response, the feeling of response of like, oh, I'm getting better now, just by putting the pill into the mouth. Even if it was actually headache medicine, the headache medicine wouldn't work that quickly. We learn to associate the behavior of taking the medicine with the results that follow. And therefore we can also have that effect when we are, when we're taking something that, we're not really sure whether or not it is the drug, or someone tells us it's the drug, but we believe them. We still can have the placebo effect, and that's our body reacting. Research has shown that you can have an immunosuppressant response or hormonal changes in response to a particular kind of drug, and just by the act of taking the drug, we might have that response even before the drug has the effect. Basically, if we take a drug and it causes us to have an immunosuppressant response, we might later on develop that immunoresponse even just by putting the pill into our mouth. And essentially that's what research has essentially discovered, is that our body learns to react the way it does to the drug even before the drug gets there. Drugs that cause hormonal changes, same thing. Our body reacts with those hormonal changes before the drug even has a chance to take its effect. It's classical conditioning. So our body's doing it even without us realizing. We've already mentioned taste aversion. Classical conditioning is always used in advertising. They associate the product they want you to buy with some pleasurable stimulus. When you see a beer commercial, you're going to see often very attractive-looking people drinking the beer. Well, when you see attractive-looking people drinking beer, you associate that attractiveness, that feeling of pleasure that you're getting from watching the commercial with the beer itself, and you're more likely to buy the beer. You associate the beer with the pleasure. Finally, habituation to drug use. When you become tolerant, when you develop tolerance for a particular drug, you need more of it to have the kind of reaction that you had in the past. Well, what's also happening within your body is preparing itself for the drug that's coming. So when you are taking heroin or meth or cocaine, your body is preparing itself even before the drug has a chance to have an effect. When you are a regular drug abuser, you might be taken in the same kind of environment, in your same place all the time, taking your drugs. Well, if you go to a different place to take your drugs this time, your body might not react as quickly, prepare itself like it does in the usual pad. So when if you're outside of your regular environment, your body actually is less prepared to take it. And when you've developed tolerance, you require a larger dose to give you the sensation you want. So if your body's not prepared as it normally is, and you take the large dose, you can overdose and die. And that's what can happen. And again, what's happening is classical conditioning. Your body is preparing itself for the drug even before the drug gets there. And that's essentially what your body is protecting itself from overdose. You don't have that if your body, that's the process that comes from